A prejudiced officer unknowingly pulls over the new black police chief. What happened next was truly unexpected. Early, one quiet morning in a small town, Marcus Johnson, a highly respected and seasoned black law enforcement officer, was driving into a new city. Marcus had recently been appointed as the chief of police, known for his unwavering commitment to justice, fairness, and respect. Today, he was on his way to take command of a department that was in dire need of strong leadership. However, Marcus wasn't in uniform. He was dressed casually, blending in with other drivers on the road, unaware that his routine drive would soon become anything but. As Marcus continued his drive, his mind wandered to the challenges that lay ahead. Leading a new police department carried significant responsibilities, ones that he had been preparing for over the course of decades. He thought about the officers he would command, the community he would serve, and the changes he hoped to implement. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by the flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror. He had been pulled over. Marcus calmly pulled his SUV over to the side of the road. His heart rate stayed steady, and his expression remained neutral. No signs of frustration or concern. This wasn't Marcus's first time being pulled over by the police. He was well acquainted with the routine. Keep his hands visible on the steering wheel, respond politely, and follow every instruction. Yet, something deep inside told him this stop might be different. Officer Tom Richards, a white cop in his late 30s, stepped out of his patrol car and walked toward the SUV. Tom had a reputation in the department, a no-nonsense officer who rarely smiled and often carried an air of superiority. His co-workers admired his dedication, but there were murmurs about him, rumors that Tom's worldview was influenced by prejudices he had never truly examined. As Tom approached the vehicle, his gaze narrowed. He saw Marcus behind the wheel, a black man driving an SUV in this part of town. Without any reason, his mind began to make assumptions, jumping to conclusions that had no real foundation. To him, Marcus was instantly suspicious, though nothing about the situation justified that reaction, not because of anything Marcus had done, but simply because of who he was. Tom's tone was sharp as he barked his first command, "License and registration now." His voice carried an authority that left no room for discussion. Marcus moved slowly and deliberately to retrieve his documents, fully aware that any quick movements could easily be misunderstood. Without a word, he handed over his license and registration, maintaining steady eye contact with Tom. His expression was calm and composed, the look of a man who had experienced far too many situations like this and knew how to navigate them. Tom snatched the documents from Marcus, barely looking at him. As he scanned the license, a flicker of recognition crossed his mind. The name seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite place it, and frankly, he didn't care. To Tom, Marcus was just another outsider, another potential issue passing through his town. "What are you doing in this part of town?" Tom asked, his voice thick with suspicion. "Just passing through," Marcus replied evenly, his voice calm and steady. But Tom wasn't satisfied with that answer. Tom leaned in closer to the window, his eyes narrowing even further. "Passing through, huh? Where are you headed?" he demanded. "Into the city," Marcus replied, keeping his answers brief and respectful, hoping to avoid any unnecessary escalation. Tom's mind raced, desperately searching for anything to justify his rising suspicion. He scanned Marcus from head to toe, looking for any clue that this man didn't belong. "What's your business in the city?" Tom's tone sharpened, becoming more accusatory. Marcus paused for a moment, considering his options. He could easily reveal his identity now, end this uncomfortable situation, and remind this officer of the respect that his position demanded. But something stopped him. He wanted to see how this interaction would unfold, to better understand the man standing in front of him. "I work in law enforcement," Marcus said finally, his voice steady and calm. Tom raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. He had encountered plenty of people who claimed to be something they weren't, and to him, this didn't seem any different. "Law enforcement? You don't look like any cop I know," Tom sneered, his words laced with prejudice. Marcus didn't flinch at the insult. He had faced far worse over the years. Instead, he kept his composure, choosing to let the situation unfold naturally. There was no need to assert his authority prematurely. He had nothing to prove to this officer. Tom, however, was growing more agitated with each passing moment. He flipped through Marcus's documents again, his mind desperately searching for any reason to escalate the situation further. The name on the license kept tugging at him. Why did it seem so familiar? Unable to ignore the nagging feeling, Tom abruptly asked, "What's your father's name?" Marcus smiled slightly, understanding exactly where this line of questioning was heading. "My father's name doesn't matter," Marcus responded calmly, then added, "But what about yours, officer? What's your father's name?" The question caught Tom off guard, and his face tightened as he hesitated. Yet something in Marcus's tone pushed him to answer. "Richard," he said, almost reluctantly. "Richard Richards," Tom said, though his voice was now less certain. Marcus's eyes softened, a glimmer of recognition crossing his face. "Richard Richards. Your father became a cop, didn't he? Joined the force after going through a rough patch in his life." Tom's confusion grew. "How do you know that?" he asked, his suspicion now tinged with curiosity. Marcus remained calm, but his voice took on a deeper tone, one that conveyed a sense of connection Tom couldn't ignore. "I knew your father. I was there for him when he needed someone. I gave him a hand when he was down, supported him when others turned their backs. I'm the reason he got a second chance and became a cop." Tom's breath caught in his throat. His father had often spoken of a man who had helped him during the darkest moments of his life, a man who had believed in him when no one else would. Those stories had stayed with Tom, though he had never known the identity of that man. You're the one my dad always talked about?" Tom asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The one who helped him?" Marcus nodded, confirming the realization that was slowly dawning on Tom. Marcus nodded, his expression still calm, but now filled with a deep sense of understanding. "Yes, Tom, I'm that man, and I'm also the new chief of police for this city." The revelation hit Tom like a ton of bricks. The man he had treated with suspicion, the man he had disrespected without a second thought, wasn't just his father's savior, he was also his new boss. Guilt and shame washed over Tom, leaving him speechless. I didn't know," Tom stammered, his voice shaking with regret. "Chief, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Marcus looked at him, his expression soft but his voice remaining firm. "Tom, this isn't just about me. This is about how you treat people. You didn't know who I was, but that shouldn't matter. You judged me because of the color of my skin, because of your own biases. That's not what being a cop is about." Tom's head dropped, shame flooding his senses. "I know," he whispered. "I was wrong. I've been wrong for a long time." Marcus nodded, acknowledging the admission, but not letting him off the hook. "It's never too late to change, Tom. but it starts with recognizing that everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are or what they look like. There was a long, heavy silence as Tom absorbed Marcus's words. Finally, Tom looked up, his eyes filled with sincerity. "Chief, would you come with me to see my dad? I think he'd want to see you, and I need to make things right." Marcus studied Tom for a moment, weighing the sincerity of his request. Then, with a nod, he agreed. "All right, Tom, let's go." They drove off together. Silence lingered, the weight of the morning's events hanging heavily between them as they approached a modest suburban home. Tom's heart raced in his chest. He hadn't seen his father in weeks, and now he was about to bring the man who had saved his father's life back into his world. The thought filled him with a strange blend of anticipation and dread. As they pulled up, Tom hesitated before stepping out of the car. Marcus noticed the unease, but remained silent. This was a moment Tom needed to face on his own. After a deep breath, Tom gathered the courage to walk to the door and knock. It opened to reveal an older man in his 60s, Richard Richards. His face lit up with surprise as he saw his son standing there, with Marcus beside him. "Marcus, is that really you?" Richard asked, his voice thick with emotion. Marcus smiled warmly. "It's good to see you, Richard. It's been a long time." Richard stepped forward and embraced Marcus, his eyes filling with tears. "You saved my life, Marcus. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for you." Marcus returned the embrace, his voice gentle yet firm. "You did the hard work, Richard. I just gave you a push when you needed it." As they stepped inside, the tension that had built up throughout the day melted away, replaced by a warmth that filled the room. The three men sat down together, and Richard began sharing stories from the past, how Marcus had been there for him when he had nothing, how he had encouraged him to join the force, and how that decision had completely changed his life. Tom listened closely, his admiration for both his father and Marcus growing with every story. He had never fully grasped the depth of their bond, but now, hearing these tales, he realized just how much he owed to Marcus, not just for helping his father, but for shaping the man he himself had become. As the afternoon progressed, the conversation shifted from past memories to the present. Richard looked at his son, his expression serious but full of love. "Tom, you're a good cop," Richard said, his voice steady. "But you need to remember why you became one in the first place. It's not about power or authority. It's about service, and that starts with how you treat people, no matter who they are," Richard said, his words filled with wisdom. Tom nodded, his voice carrying a newfound humility. "I understand now, Dad. I've been wrong, and I want to do better." Marcus observed the exchange, his heart heavy with the events of the morning, but lightened by the possibility of change. "Tom," he said softly, "the fact that you're willing to change means something, but it's not enough to just recognize your mistakes. You have to act on them every day." Tom looked at Marcus, his eyes filled with determination. "I will, Chief. I promise." And so, what began as a confrontation born from the prejudice ended in understanding, forgiveness, and a renewed hope for the future. Tom Richards learned a valuable lesson that day, a lesson in humility, respect, and the importance of looking beyond appearances. For Chief Marcus Johnson, it was a powerful reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can leave lasting impacts, creating bonds that endure through the years. As the afternoon sun began to set, Marcus, Tom, and Richard stood together outside the modest suburban home. There were no more words left to say, no further apologies needed. just the quiet understanding that sometimes life brings us together in unexpected ways, teaching us lessons we didn't even realize we needed to learn. In that moment, they were not just two officers and a retired cop. They were men, bound by respect, humility, and the shared hope for a brighter future. In the weeks that followed, Tom Richards made a conscious effort to change his ways. The encounter with Chief Marcus Johnson had shaken him to his core, forcing him to confront the biases and prejudices he had carried for too long. At work, he approached each day with a renewed sense of purpose, making a point to treat everyone he encountered with the respect and dignity they deserved. He started having open conversations with his colleagues, sharing his experience and encouraging others to reflect on their own attitudes and behaviors. Slowly but surely, people in Tom's department began to notice the shift. The shift wasn't just in Tom, but in the culture surrounding him. Meanwhile, Marcus settled into his new role as chief of police with the same steady hand that had guided him through decades of service. He continued to lead with integrity, using his position to build a department rooted in fairness and justice. However, his experience with Tom served as a reminder of the importance of personal connection, of taking the time to understand the people behind the badges and uniforms. Marcus knew that real change didn't happen just through policy. It happened through people, one interaction at a time. As for Richard, seeing the transformation in his son filled him with pride. He knew firsthand how hard it was to face one's own flaws and choose a better path. Watching Tom learn from his mistakes and grow into a more compassionate man reassured him that the lessons of the past had not been in vain. The bond between father and son deepened, strengthened by their shared understanding of what it truly meant to serve and protect. The story of Marcus, Tom, and Richard became a powerful reminder that sometimes the most significant lessons in life come from the most unexpected places. A powerful reminder, not just within the community, but beyond. A reminder that no matter how deep-seated our beliefs may be, it's never too late to change. This story taught others that humility and self-reflection are essential for personal growth, and that the most important part of any uniform is the person wearing it. It became an example of how even the most unexpected encounters can lead to profound transformation. In the end, the legacy of that fateful traffic stop extended far beyond the individuals involved. Its impact rippled outward, touching the lives of many in ways none of them could have anticipated. Marcus, Tom, and Richard knew that they would carry the lessons of that day with them always, shaping who they were and how they moved forward. In a world that often feels divided, their story stood as proof that understanding, respect, and connection can bridge even the widest divides, making us all a little better in the process.